Welcome, lovely listeners. Today I have Caroline Strzesynski, and she is with the ministry And Then There Were None, which was founded by Abby Johnson. So we're going to hear a little bit of her story today and talk about kind of the abortion industry. So we will begin um, in a moment. You're listening to the Catholic Nurse Coach podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Haugen, wife, mom, nurse, and Catholic life coach. The mission of this podcast is to coach Catholic women who work in healthcare to care for themselves so they can care for others. So, welcome, Caroline. Thank you for taking the time to be a guest today. And we're going to get started. We're going to start with prayer. And I've been reading out of this little reflection book, Do Something Beautiful for God, Essential Teachings of Mother Teresa. So, for today, the reflection is: nothing can make me holy except the presence of God. And to me, the presence of God is fidelity to small things. Fidelity to small things will lead you to Jesus. Infidelity to small things will lead you to sin. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Come, Holy Spirit. We just thank you for this time. We thank you for spring. We thank you for new things. Please help us to always open our hearts and our minds more towards you every day, to make small steps towards that. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
All right, Caroline, welcome. And so why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, and kind of like your story?
Okay. Well, I'll start at the beginning and then we'll get to where I am now. So I started out, I'm graduating nursing. So I'm a new nurse at a local hospital. And I knew when I went into nursing that I wanted to do midwifery. That was the plan. Now, at this time, I wasn't spending time with the Lord. I had walked away from the church. I'd grown up Methodist. And so I kind of just went on my own little jaunt once I went off to college. And so I come out and I'm thinking, okay, I want to work in labor and delivery. But really, to work in labor and delivery, you either need to know somebody, at least that's how it was back when I graduated, or you needed to have a couple years experience under your belt. And I wasn't really finding the hospital setting to be my favorite. And so I started looking outside of the hospital. And acquaintance of my husband worked at a local abortion clinic. And we happened to be in a van all together driving somewhere one day. And she was asking me about my women's health interests. And she said, well, maybe you would like to come shadow me someday. And I thought, I don't know about that, because it was a time where there had been a bombing of a nurse who worked at a abortion clinic. And I thought, well, I don't know that I want to take part and set myself up for something like that. And she was talking about the safety features they had as far as that goes. And she just said, I don't know, I think it's worth you shadowing at least. And so I went in and I shadowed her, and she was working in the after abortion care. And so it was the blood pressures, checking bleeding status, seeing the comfort level of the gals, providing them with the aftercare information that they were going to go home with. And so that's the part that I was seeing. And by the end of the day, I was hired. So I found it was kind of seamless for me. It was legal in the state of Ohio. I didn't believe that I would have an abortion myself ever. However, I thought, this is legal. Women are seeking this out. There's a need for it. So I started working there. And so I worked in direct abortion care just in the recovery room capacity. So I didn't provide any of the before abortion counseling, none of that. But I saw the aftermath of it. So in the recovery room, it's known as a very sad space. There's a lot of tears. A woman has just ended her pregnancy. It was all surgical termination then. So this was literally the ripping limb from limb of these little embryos, fetuses, children. And so when I did see it, I saw the products of conception. I knew what that looked like. The one that bothered me most was a young lady who was completely healthy. Her pregnancy was completely healthy, and she terminated at 19 weeks. So that's the one termination that just really stuck and made an impression on me. I worked there for a time and then I ended up leaving. That did not cause me to leave. It just stuck with me and still sticks with me to this day. I ended up with a job at Planned Parenthood as a staff nurse. We had a local Planned Parenthood as well. We still do. And so I was a staff nurse. I became an HIV counselor, an STD examiner. I went on to become a women's health nurse practitioner with them. And then I became a mother. And after becoming a mother, I became a Christian. And so then once I became a Christian, and it was during my maternity leave that I started getting bitter with Planned Parenthood. They had wanted more than I wanted to offer them after becoming a mom. And so my hours were cut hugely. I was in a contract with them because of becoming a women's health nurse practitioner through them. And so there just kind of became this turmoil, this struggle. And I felt this bitterness and distraction from raising my daughter. So I went back to church. That's where my foundation was growing up. That's where I knew I could find peace. And I hadn't had other issues in between my teenage years to that point where I felt like I had such a strong need to return to the church, and I did. And so it was back in the church that I started really voraciously reading the Bible, and then read the book of Matthew. And I felt like that is where I became the most connected with Jesus. There was so much about Jesus in Matthew. And the pastor had recommended, if you want to get to know Jesus, read the book of Matthew. And so that's what I did. And so then I came to faith, and I've been with my husband since I was 18. He grew up Catholic and did not practice in the whole time that I knew him. And so then it became one of those, well, I want my husband, to come into the church as well. And so working behind the scenes on that. But back to work wise, I went ahead and take the offer from Planned Parenthood for lesser time. And I ended up finding another job, still basically doing all the same things. So a lot of contraception, a lot of STD care, a lot of emergency contraception. That was kind of the new hot thing. It hadn't gone over the counter yet. It was just kind of in the midst of those transitions. And so with time, I just started seeing my work like, I don't know, I just was conflicted a little bit and I couldn't quite understand it. And I found myself becoming more pro-life in my thinking, but not even realizing it until I look back now. Well, not just now, but after leaving. So then there was a time where they were doing the instructional for the Nexplanon implant that had come out on the market. And that's the one that's subdermal, goes under the arm. Just under the skin of the arm, and it lasts for 3 years. And by then, the Planned Parenthoods had started merging. So electronic health records had been coming out like probably within the 5 years of this merge, and just they found strength in numbers in doing the merger. And when we merged with the other affiliates in Ohio, we were then directly connected with Planned Parenthoods who did do direct abortion services. And so when I went to do the training on that implant, I was back into direct abortion services. So the morning was just doing the training, learning about it. The afternoon was then, okay, Caroline, you're going to go to the abortion clinic and you're going to do the procedure on the young ladies there. And I just felt very unsettled on the trip going. Because like I said, I had been away from direct abortion care. So I worked with Planned Parenthood a total of 15 years. And so it had probably been, let me think timeline wise, maybe around a decade since I'd been in the direct abortion space. And so I really was unsettled, walked in, I could see the ladies lined up. I'm looking at them very differently now. So I'm seeing these women, but I'm not just seeing the women, I'm seeing the life within. And I see the destruction and like the generational impact that this is going to be. And I just did not know what to do. I prayed, thank God I prayed. And I felt God's presence. It was very palpable. And I knew at this point that I would probably no longer be working for Planned Parenthood. And he just continued to make it more and more clear as I was there for the short time that I was there. While I was there, I overheard and saw things that just left me more unsettled. And those are details I generally keep to myself. Those are things I will talk in then the Renan setting, but I feel like Abby's brought enough to the scene on details that I can keep things a little personal to myself. So that's what I choose to do. And there's her movies coming out soon with all the other gals who are going to share like some of the awful details of things. So in seeing what and hearing what I was hearing, I knew that I had to go, like literally right then had to go. I hadn't even driven myself there. So I'm like an hour and a half away from home. So I'm going to have to convince my, manager who brought me there that we have to leave. But I didn't have to really convince or do anything because God had it all covered. I literally said the words, I've seen enough and it's time for me to go. And my supervisor said, I completely respect your decision. And then we were walking to find my manager and we were leaving. I mean, it just went, nobody asked questions, not a thing. We just seamlessly left and I'm on my way home. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I wonder who's going to reach out and wonder why I didn't do any of the procedures, but it doesn't matter because I'll be resigning anyway. And from at that time, I knew nothing of and then the run on. So when I left, I did it solo. But on the car ride, things got even worse. I'm with my manager, and so I was asking what the manager's meeting was about, and she had mentioned quotas. And quotas for what? It was quotas for abortion. And I asked, well, are our numbers going down? And she said, no. I said, well, that's not good. To which she kind of chuckled and said, Caroline, we don't want our numbers to go down. And I said, what do you mean? I said, isn't 97% of what we do preventive health services and only 3%. I mean, sad to say that's what I was thinking at the time. 3%, of course, is large. But in my mind, only 3%, or what I vocalized was only 3% is abortion. And she said, well, that's what we want the public to believe. And I thought in my mind, that's what I believed, even working there. And so then it was explained to me that that's how they make their money. And I thought, how is it how we make our money when I'm working in a Planned Parenthood that doesn't provide direct abortion services? Because in my mind, I thought, well, I'm working like any other OB-GYN office, providing birth control, STDs, PAPs, breast exams, colposcopy, those sorts of things. So I just from there got home and knew that I needed to create my resignation letter. I was the key money maker of the household, so that was going to be difficult to just kind of step out in faith. But I had a good friend who I had done a study on the book of Esther with. And so I said, you know what? I need you to join me. We need to pray and fast for 3 days, and then I'm going to take it to my husband, like Esther did with her husband. And I said, that's what we're going to do. And it worked out. So my husband supported me through that, not knowing where we were going to go. But in the meantime, God orchestrated another job for me very easily. And so we lost benefits, huge pay cut, those sorts of things that don't make worldly sense, but from a spiritual aspect and when you're kingdom minded, we persevered and God provided for us. And we can look back at that time. And it was through that time that my husband it was so obvious how God was working in our lives, whether he was with me in church or not, God was working. And so fast forward 9 years, he did come to faith and I'm out of Planned Parenthood. So then from there, I've now done the transition from prescribing contraceptives to natural family planning and going back to school to become a NAPRO consultant and a Creighton fertility care practitioner. So, I mean, the journey has really been kind of long and interesting along the way, but that's where we're at today with all of that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So first, my first question is, so then did you become Catholic and did your husband kind of come back into the church?
Yeah, so in the last year, so doing Creighton, one of my clients' mothers, we just bonded. She was my first client who I didn't know. So I'm just starting the Creighton fertility care practitioner internship. And she's my first client I don't know. Everybody else was a friend of mine, like, hey, can I teach you and your daughter's Creighton? I'll do it at no cost, So I was doing this pro bono care. And then this was going to be the first one that I was going to see who is completely new, don't know what scene I'm entering, and she's Catholic and all that. So I'm like, how are these people going to embrace me? If they find out who I really am. And so I do the introductory session with the young lady, and her mom sat in on it. And I don't remember how or why, but she happened to bring up, have you ever heard of Abby Johnson or the movie Unplanned? I'm like, as a matter of fact, I have. And so she's like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. She's this friend of mine. She is such a voracious reader, and she is such a proponent of good books. And so she will tell you about the latest thing she read, and she will just encourage you, like, if you have the time, you should read this because, and she just shares with anybody. Like, if I ever write a book, she will be in my book as far as like her little nugget on the back. What do they call that, review or whatever? But anyway, she was just so lovely. And then I just shared, like I shared with you, I'm like, I used to work for Planned Parenthood. I used to work in direct abortion services. I'm in Abby Johnson's ministry. And she just embraced me like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And she was just so supportive and kind. She later invited me to a Catholic women's Bible study. And so I started going to that and meeting with those ladies. They talk about Catholics not knowing the Bible. And I'm like, I don't know how you couldn't, considering how Mass is a whole lot of scripture. And like the Mass follows the Bible. And like just pieces of it. I'm like, oh, that's in Matthew, or, I'm picking out what's where. I'm like, oh, wow, this is so neat. So I started going to Mass when I went to the St. Paul VI Institute, okay, for the training. And so I was going to Mass then during weekdays because I was so amazed that you could go to church during the weekdays. And I was in this big transition that didn't make any worldly sense. And I kind of thought I was going crazy. And so I found myself going to Mass and then going to the Catholic Women's Bible Study. And I still have all my Protestant friends too. There's still deep love there. And I still do a Protestant Bible study as well. And so she had invited me then to do, they call it OCIA classes. It used to be RCIA, the Rite of, and now it's the Order of. And so I thought, what a great idea. I can learn more about my clients, right? So many of my clients who are natural family planning, interested in Creighton, a lot of them are in fertility and won't do IUI or IVF. And so I thought, what a great way for me to learn more. And I was already kind of having this theology of the body thinking, not realizing there was an actual theology of the body, like information out there through the Catholic Church. And so I did it. And I'm on a medical advisory board for a local pregnancy center too. And I remember talking with one of the gals from the Catholic Bible study and saying, I'm going to start these classes. She's like, are you thinking of converting? I'm like, oh no, I'm just going to learn about the patients I serve. And so in the time that I was doing the training or the learning, I just started becoming more and more in line with the faith. And I thought, I think I'm Catholic. And so talked to my husband about, coming home and talking to him with things. Now he is Catholic. He grew up Catholic. But in the time, that I know him, the only time we went to a Catholic church together was for a funeral mass or a wedding.
Sure.
And so, and same for his folks. And so I'm coming home and I'm sharing what I'm learning. And next thing I know, I'm getting baptized and he ended up meeting with a deacon and we were on board. There were some transitions happening at the church that I was going to. So the amendment in Ohio came out and I go and going to Mass, they're talking about abortion openly, right? Other local churches were talking about it. The church I was going to spoke very little on it and really didn't give any context or content or any resources or support to anybody. And I did interact with the pastor on those pieces. Like, hey, I think we missed the boat on some things here. But he really did not want to get involved with it. And that hurt my soul because I thought, how can you not? This isn't about politics. This is like, you could provide biblical guidance here and resources for help for families who find themselves in a situation. And so anyway, it was that. There were a couple other things, like the way communion was done. It was kind of done off on your own during a certain part of the service, and it wasn't in community with the rest of the church. And so there were just those things for me that were just, I couldn't embrace them. And then it just made it easier to go. And then my son had an issue at church that he actually misbehaved on. And I thought, okay, well, at this point, it's just time for an exit. And so we did. We started going to the Catholic Church as a family. And then we did, my husband and I did our I did my first confession. It was his first confession after 30 years. And then we did a convalidation of our marriage and came into the Catholic Church this Easter.
Oh, wow.
It's very fresh and new, all of it.
Yeah.
And I was on a walk with my son the other day and we were talking about things. There's a lot that's gone on at home and in our family in the last couple of years too, and just letting him process some things as well. And he's like, I understand why we're going, Mom. And he's 14. He's like, you're looking for deeper meaning in your faith right now. And I thought, and he's seeing it, too, how the mass is set up and there's such reverence for God in it. And I mean, I think when God says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, I feel like the Catholic Church does a really great job doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, welcome home. That is amazing. So good. I love too how God just like he's sneaky. Like he kind of keeps
He
showing up.
pursues us. Yeah, he does.
Right? Like he's just like, yes, yes, he just loves us so much. And it's just beautiful to hear how that love has just come through in your life, just how he just keeps just kind of being there, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so going back to the day that you were going to get training for
The implant.
and so when you went to the clinic and when saw the women lined up and you went in and so I want to go back to that time because you said like, you saw it differently and then you prayed, right? Because we're like, and most of us, we see these things, but when we're like, I don't know what to do, we panic, right? And we just like show up in a way we don't want to, or we just go along with it, and then we feel guilt and shame later. And but you were like, I'm gonna lean on the Lord. Like, can you describe like kind of what you were thinking in that moment that got you to the calm, I'm gonna pray instead of going the other way and being like, okay, just gotta put my head down, just get through the day. Like, what was going on?
So calm is kind of my normal. So calm and kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's my normal.
Okay.
So it wasn't too difficult for me to just, I don't know. It had to have been God to just say, pray.
Yeah.
There was a part of me that thought, do I create a scene? Do you like start shouting and telling them get out of here? Like there was that part of me that kind of went there, like, what do I do with this, God? What do I do? But it was just pray.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say just pray because we know prayer is very powerful, but pray.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Yeah. But yes, and to see like, okay, sometimes the situation doesn't call for that, right? Like, but you had enough insight to be like, should I do that? Right? Because I think we often, a lot of what I see, Catholic women who work in healthcare, what we struggle with is when to speak up, when to not speak up. And so a lot of times it's just, and we're trying to make that decision ourselves, right? Like we don't pray about it. We struggle with it internally on how to move forward. And then we end up like, I mean, kind of from my own experience, like if I was silent in the moment, and I was like, oh, man, I probably should have spoke up or I should have done this. But instead, like when we just take a moment and just, okay, just even just pause and breathe and be like, okay, God, what do you want me to do?
I think pause is the big word. I think, well, I think it's in James, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, that quick, slow, slow. I think that kind of has to be our cue in these situations that catch us off guard. You do have to listen. I have found that in rooms with patients where I'm like, this is a really complicated situation for this individual. God, I know you're here. I know they may not know you're in their life, but I know you're here. Help me see you somehow in this. Like I have, like when I'm listening to Heart and Lungs, that's when I'm talking to God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess if you're a Catholic nurse, that's when you can get a lot of insight. You're going to be putting your hands on that patient. You're going to be listening for a moment. Listen to the heart, listen to the lungs, and let God speak to you in that moment. That's a good time to have it.
Yeah.
And
I
so
love that.
that's where I get my directives of if I'm supposed to speak more into a situation or if I'm to just supposed to listen, be there, and love them with mercy.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because it gives something, a tangible thing to connect to of like, okay, when I put my stethoscope on and like listen to the heart and lungs, I'm gonna
That's
pray.
your
And
cue.
yeah, it's your
Mhm,
cue. It just helps remind us, right? And like,
mhm.
and what I like, I've been teaching like the ABCs of you, right? So like it kind of brings back to like, airway, breathing, circulation, but like
Oh, okay. I was
for
thinking something scriptural. I'm like, what's the ABC?
no,
Okay, yeah, I got
but
you. I'm
yeah,
with
so what
you.
I did is I took it and like the ABCs for you. So awareness, breathing, and then control, right? So like awareness of just pausing and being like, okay, breathing, taking that pause, that deep breath, and then what can I control in this situation? And I love that where then you turn it to God and you're just like, okay, how do you want me to show up? Should I speak more? Should I bite my tongue?
Mhm,
Like almost God, you're in control, right? Like,
mhm. Yeah, I don't like that control for
yeah,
us. No, you got to hand
yeah,
that over.
yeah, give that to God, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, so that was a question I also had was with the women that you said, and you said you didn't do a lot, you did more of the after care from
It was all
abortion.
the recovery room is what
Yeah.
they call it. So it's all that, how are you going to take care of yourself at home? The other thing is sometimes the gals need to go back in for a repeat suction because all the abortion I did was all surgical. The medical pill abortion was just kind of coming on the scene, but I don't know, back when I worked at the private clinic, I don't recall them providing that. I
Okay.
think it was all surgical.
Yeah. Do you know what most why most women are coming to seek out abortions?
That can be a variety of reasons. It's generally, it's not because the woman's health is at risk
Mhm.
or that there's a complication or issue with the pregnancy itself. It's usually a matter of how am I going to pay the bills? Do I have support, meaning other people? Was it a hookup? Because we do live in a culture now where there's a lot of, on your phone becomes your dating app and you're in lining up sexual encounters. And so sometimes I don't even know this person's last name, so I'm going to get an abortion. So there's a variety of reasons why, or I simply don't want to be pregnant. In their eyes, some women feel simply they don't want to be pregnant ever. And so there's so many reasons I can't pinpoint it down to one. But I think, the money thing is huge. And so one of the beauties of the pro-life ministry and like pro-love that Abby started was to kind of fill those gaps where the pregnancy centers weren't able to help with, rent assistance, car assistance, trying to find those local resources to come alongside these ladies and help them through their pregnancies and kind of continue with them, right? I mean, they offer even like financial coaching and other things because some gals, they have not had any of that support either. It's not like a piece we learn in high school or it's so necessary in raising your family. And so they come alongside and do those things. So support, financial, spiritual, counseling, all those pieces are needed. There's a big fear in pregnancy. And unfortunately, a lot of women don't take time because they feel like they need to act as soon as possible.
Mhm.
The cost is less when you act as soon as possible. And so that's one of the things if you're concerned about finances, which tends to be a big one.
Mhm. Yeah. So how can so when we see maybe it's not even somebody that we've directly is our patient, but maybe it's somebody that we just know in our community or, at a church, just anywhere, and
Mhm.
we find out, okay, like this woman is leaning towards abortion. Like,
Mhm.
what have you found to be a good way to approach them, to talk with them, communicate with them?
I think the important reason thing to ask is, what is your reason for looking into termination?
Mm,
They have a reason. So
mhm,
you have to find out, well, what is that? And then maybe there's something they don't even know that's available to them. And then, I'm a college student. There's no way I'm going to be able to provide daycare and stay in school. Well, did you know that in Bowling Green, there's something called the Nest and they provide free daycare to students in school? I mean, sometimes it's just knowing like, hey, there is this support network here. Or have you gone to thus and such pregnancy center to have a conversation about this? Because I mean, those ladies are trained, that's what they do, right? And so they can talk to them. And one of the neat things about pregnancy centers that I have found, because working in Planned Parenthood, you really think that they're deceptors. Okay, and so in my experience, I have not seen that. The bulk of the ladies who either start the pregnancy centers or who are working in the pregnancy centers have had an abortion themselves.
mm,
And I think that's amazing because they can truly speak into the experience
mhm,
and the after experience of it all too. And there are some women that even if they know all the resources and you've provided all the love, they're still going to get that abortion done. And so then the next piece is to make sure that they know that you are still going to love them and you are still going to want to provide them with care and counseling and help them work through that decision because there is going to be aftercare that's usually needed.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, that is beautiful to see them as the whole human person, right? Like from
Mhm.
beginning to end, and asking,
Mhm.
being open, and then educating ourselves on what resources are in the area. And
Mhm.
I like that too. I mean, I guess I've never thought of it before about just being so direct and saying, hey, what are your reasons? Like,
Mhm.
I like that too, to just,
Yeah, we're not supposed to ask the why questions, right, as nurses, because we put people on the offensive, but asking, what is your reason? Like, is there anything in particular? Is there a variety of things going on? Because you can't know the reason why they're searching it out until you know their why.
yeah, 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 I like that. So, and then also with parents, mothers, fathers that have like a medically complex diagnosis for a child in utero.
Mhm.
So, and I know like you kind of worked on the recovery side, but is there a way, like, what are your thoughts on, again, talking through the process with them, like giving them options? And maybe it's just the same as kind of somebody who is thinking about abortion. I just, I know for my own personal, like women's health, like most hospitals, clinics are very much birth control, push to birth control, push this, push that. So like, how would you say in a setting where we're in a public clinic, a
Mhm.
hospital, we have to be careful about talking about our faith, pushing things, but also to be loving in a way that like, we can live out our faith as well.
Mhm. Well, I don't tend to see this component in my work,
Mhm.
believe it or not. And so that's where because I'm not doing direct OB services, right?
Mm.
Mine is just gynecologic service. That's been my strong suit. Now I'm going into the midwifery role, but I'm just tiptoeing into that's God. Yeah, he's doing that too. So he's gonna bring me full circle
Yeah.
before the end of it all. But I currently don't have that direct OB experience where you're because you'd be having a client who's either doing like an amniocentesis, what do they call it? Why can't I think of it? The choreo something. I don't know. Can't think of the word. That happens sometimes with my brain. It's in there. I could Google it, but we're not going to do that right now.
It's
And
fine.
so they have these days, and then the quad screen, or is it the penta screen now? I don't know what they call it these days. And then they have the ultrasound usually around 16 to 20 weeks where they're looking for the organ systems and those things. So it's during those phases when women are looking into whether there could potentially be a problem. And so usually they're in OB care when that happens. But then sometimes maternal fetal medicine is getting involved from there. So it's really about those people who are guiding them what their belief systems are too. It seems like there tends to be more of a push toward abortion in these, scenarios. Where I see a difference is if the gals are pro-life to start, and they are usually faith-based in their pro-lifeness. And so they're ready to take on whatever God has provided them. And so I think that's some of the key differences is you usually see a faith background or a pro-lifeness at the start, and that's where people tend to decide what they're going to do. But I think we're doing a disservice too, because there is the possibility of adoption. And I don't feel like people really bring that up as an option in a pregnancy that's complicated. So I feel like maybe somehow discussing, like, have you considered adoption? There are families who that's their mission and that's their ministry, to serve babies and children with difficulties. And maybe they haven't considered that as an option. Again, I think the key thing is for people to really be as well informed as possible, because you often hear women say they have their abortions and then later they have regrets. They didn't know. I mean, I feel like let's provide you with as much information as possible, so then you are in the know. And if you choose that, you've chosen that on your own accord, but you were giving the information for another option.
Yeah. Yes, to educate, right? And to like lay out all the options.
Yeah, all the options, right? I mean, they can continue and parent and finding the resources to help them through that experience, but they also have the option to provide another family with that ministry.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what if you could advise, and I know that you're just newly Catholic, but that's sometimes the best time to be like, okay, like this is my faith now. Like if you could encourage Catholic women in the healthcare setting, wherever they may be, to help live out their faith while they still, work in a world that is very secular, right? Like there's gonna be birth control, there's gonna be one night stands, there's gonna be all these things.
Mhm.
And so what advice would you have for her to be in the world but not of the world?
Mm. So, I mean, a lot of that is just spending time in the Word and spending time with other women of faith, and like you can do a Bible study and dive deeper. So, I mean, those are the things. Prayer is huge. So, having a good prayer life as well, setting that quiet time aside each day, because I mean, if we don't set some time aside to be with the Lord, we're going to get wrapped up into the culture as well. I mean, it's not hard to do, it's all around us. But that's the only things I can really think is just, you have to be in the Word, you have to be grounded in your faith, you have to be praying. Did I miss a component of your question?
No, I think that's perfect. Just root yourself
And
in God, right?
yeah, just know, I mean, and nursing provides you with such an opportunity to really be the hands and feet of Jesus. And you have to know that people are on their own timeline with their journey with Jesus too. I mean, look at mine. I mean, it's been like, this has been a journey of like 20 years now. So that is the one thing I've learned. The Lord is very patient. There are some things that have to be right now. And I think he makes that very clear. And that doesn't mean we all listen to him in the right now moment, but he will let you know. And I feel like he can talk to any person in that regard. He's God. But we have to realize too that people are on a journey and it's not going to be on your timeline. And so if you can just, be the hands and feet of Jesus, be that mercy, be that love that they may not be getting that or seeing that anywhere else. And until they get that and see it and experience it, then they might become, if you're in a situation where you're with them over time, more interested in how you can be so nice to them in the first place. You know what I mean? So people come in a variety of ways. And
Yeah.
so I just think it's just important that, Jesus, how would you approach this right now?
Yeah. And loving
And
them.
just remember, he's patient.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Again, great. I love that. Nursing provides you to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and Jesus is patient. It's
Mhm.
not our time, right? It's on
Nope,
on
we're
his
all on a
time.
journey. You got to let him work us through it.
Yeah. And we never know too what little thing we say or how we treated somebody can have a ripple effect, either negative or positive.
And actions do speak louder than words. So sometimes just being present and being kind.
Yeah.
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 Oh,
I wish I had answers to all sorts of things, like how do we make it so nobody wants to consider abortion ever? How do we, you know, have this wonderful wisdom to just say the right thing? But I I don't have it. I don't have it. I don't have that answer at all.
yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I do think it is very easy to get caught up in all those things.
Mhm.
And to again, if you're reading your Bible, you're praying, you're taking some quiet time during the day, even if in that moment you didn't show up how you wanted to, or you felt like, "Ugh, I think really God was nudging me," to just reflect on that and then say,
Mhm.
okay, thank you, Lord, for the opportunity. Like from there, I'm gonna grow. Like to pause and reflect, I think is a big portion that we often miss. In
Mhm.
society, we want to be busy, busy, go, go, go. We don't pause,
Mhm.
reflect. And so therefore a lot of times we don't learn and grow from it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And we have to learn to let some things go too. You just can't ruminate on everything, and
absolutely.
just know that he'll give you another opportunity somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so that is so with when you said you started the first client that you had that you didn't really know, right? Like you went into her home, she was
Mhm.
Catholic, and when you said, oh, like if they find out who I really am, right?
Mhm.
Like I think a lot of times we hide in shame either because we are Catholic and we don't want to be persecuted, right? Like we don't want them to find out who I really am, or
Mm.
just in general as a human, we're like, "Ugh, like if they really knew, if they really knew, like I yell at my kid,
Mhm.
or if they really knew, like I don't know, I scroll on Facebook all night long, or whatever you're
Mhm.
maybe drinking or whatever. Like, how did you open up then to talk about it? And how could like what do you how would you encourage women to talk about like if they've ever had an abortion, if
Mhm.
they've been part of like the abortion industry, any of that? Because I also think that like talking about it, which is why I'm a coach, obviously, talking about
Mhm.
these things, being coached on it or opening up, like it brings light to it instead of
Mhm.
darkness and hiding and shame.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would
Catholic
you
guilt is real, isn't it?
oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
am not, I don't intend to ever participate in it. I've decided like not going to do it because I've seen how it really affects these ladies. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. It is. It is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all have different spiritual gifts though, right?
Yes.
My mercy is one of mine. So I think I have mercy with myself as well. So
Nice.
that helps. All right. So back to your question. That was a lot. Tell me give me a summary of that again.
Yeah. So how would you encourage women to open up and share
Open up.
about
Okay.
like their past, like whatever it
Mhm.
be, and maybe
Yeah.
not even something as like, yeah, I worked in the abortion industry or I had an abortion. Maybe it's just even, I'm questioning my faith right now, or my husband and I, like our marriage is not in a good place. Like, how would
Just
you
that willingness to be
yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there is a time and a place, right? Like we don't want to just
Mhm.
like word vomit all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I I don't know. I just wait for the moment to share my background with my clients. So all my clients, if I have at least one or two follow-ups with them, I share with them. I just want you to know my background. In case you Google me, hear something, I want you to hear it from me, and then I want you to make a decision on if you want to continue care with me. So I kind of approach my background that way. That has provided an opportunity then for women to share about an experience they may have had. So with me, I mean, I was involved in such a dark space, right? In life. I mean, it wasn't even life, it was death. And so when I open up that vulnerability, people can be very vulnerable back because they can share. And I find a lot of women will actually share more about sexual encounters they had prior to marriage that maybe nobody knows. Or an abortion, they drove their friend to get an abortion, or they had an abortion themselves and they've never told anybody. So people tell me a lot of things. And I think, being in a nursing role when you're doing histories and you're caring for people, if they truly feel cared for and that they can speak, they will, and they'll share. And I think the fact that I worked in such an ugly space, so not everybody has, the journey I've been on. And so some people are going to get more information, some people aren't, and we have to be okay with, however we've grown up and done life too. And so I tend to be a little more open and honest about the things I do. Like if I was really harsh with my son, I have a friend, we go on walks a lot. I'm like, I really missed the mark on that one. And then, and just addressing it and then having a conversation with my son about it later, or getting harsh with my husband. And then my kids even see it and witness it. And then we apologize, we talk about it, and I let the kids know, hey, I did apologize to your dad for, what we did. So I think the people around you need to see that you're vulnerable as well for them to be comfortable with being vulnerable with you.
Yeah.
And so if we look like we have it all together and we pretend that we do, like nobody's going to share anything with you. They're going to be like, well, she would never understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that a lot of times, again, the Catholic guilt kind of plays in where it's like, I gotta be perfect. I gotta be perfect. I gotta show up all the time. But I
We are
really,
not Jesus.
right? I do think that
Mm.
that hinders a lot of time. Well, for one, our perception of how we should be, and that
Mhm.
to have forgiveness for ourselves, because that can mess with our minds a bit. So to have forgiveness for ourselves, but then yeah, to be open to sharing, and again, you're not sharing everything with everyone all the time, but to share and say, hey, this has been my journey through life, and to have compassion for others and for ourselves of we're all on this journey through life, and to allow then that vulnerability from others.
Yeah. And we have confession too.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we're able to go do confession. If we feel like we can't talk to those around us about something that's happened, we should be able to get some sort of resolution with confession, or at least confess it. And then if that doesn't bring resolution, then maybe have a one-on-one meeting with somebody who is, of faith, who can provide some loving guidance and direction and speak into it that way too.
Yeah, for sure. And that is a perfect segue into a plug for going to my catholicnursecoach.com. If anybody is struggling with anything, what coaching does, it provides you with a safe space where you can come and you can share. And I am fully Catholic, so it's another safe space to share your faith and the struggles that you're going through without judgment, and to look at how you're showing up and to move forward from there. So um, just thank you so much, Caroline, for taking your time to visit and to be on this podcast and sharing your journey and your experience. And so we can learn and grow from that and help provide care for others, and maybe just being aware of things that if we don't experience all the time, or we don't have that insight, if that's not our background. I do think that it's important to hear from others so that we know how to be the hands and feet of Jesus in caring for those who have been there and gone through those things. So thank you so much for your time.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you.
I am, if you want to sign up for a free coaching call to get a consult with me, go to catholicnursecoach.com, and I am praying for you, and let's go change our world.